All right, I will call our special meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our special meeting of Williamsport City Council. It's Thursday, May 27th. We're in train transit. It's Tuesday. It is Tuesday. The agenda says Thursday. I was reading it verbatim. So it is Tuesday. For those that are thrown off by the Memorial Day, like I am, it is Tuesday, not Thursday. So call the meeting to order. Please rise for the flag salute and we will get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll get right to it. We'll move to item 3, a presentation on home rule form of government by Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. This is not a voting meeting. This is simply an information gathering work session. I think as anybody that pays attention to council meetings knows, I think for probably the past, 6-ish months, I think we've probably openly made reference to the idea of exploring this. And I think entering into another phase of the strategic management planning process with DCED, this is something that has come to the forefront of a lot of, I think, members of council's thoughts, and certainly, I think, from DCED's perspective as well here. So we are going to have an introductory presentation on home rule, what it looks like, what the process looks like. I think have the opportunity to ask some questions. Same with the public. We have a number of people from the public here. We have a line item here where members of the public can ask questions, whatever pops into your mind, whether it's in any prep you may have done leading up to tonight, anything you hear from tonight. So we want to hear from you as well. So a little bit of setting the stage into tonight. I'll turn it over to Jonas Crass from PA Department of Community and Economic Development. He's going to lead us through a presentation from the state and kind of kick us off. So I will turn it over to you, sir. Welcome from Harrisburg. We're glad to have you. Or is this a Harrisburg, Wilkes-Barre? Either way.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, okay. There you go.
Thank you, Council President Yoder and members of council for inviting us to speak today. My name is Jonas Crass. I am a local government policy specialist with the Governor's Center for Local Government Services with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. I thank you all for inviting us today to learn more about the home rule process. As you're entering into the strategic management grant program with the state, oftentimes we do see one of the recommendations is the consideration of home rule. And what that process looks like is what we'll be reviewing today. Before I begin, I will also like to introduce our Deputy Executive Director, Andrew Sheaf, for the Governor's Center, who's with us as well. Any technical questions I may not be able to ask, Andrew will be able to, hopefully. So our agenda here today, welcome and introductions. We'll do an overview of the Governor's Center of Local Government Services. We'll also do a home rule overview, and then we will open up for a Q&A. Now, I understand some members of council may not be familiar with the Governor's Center as well as members of the public, so I thought it was beneficial to quickly go over what we do. The Governor's Center for Local Government Services, it's a long name, but really it's a one-stop shop for local government officials. We provide a wealth of knowledge and expertise on all matters affecting local government operations throughout Pennsylvania. So throughout this whole process of STAMP, we'll be your points of contact. If you have any questions for us at all, with any technical assistance, we are here to help. Oftentimes, we find that one thing that is troubling one community is often a pressure point for others as well. So we like to find common sense solutions to those common problems. So one of those ways that we do that is technical and financial assistance. Oftentimes, this can come to the municipality at no cost as well. So just real quickly, we'll go over what that looks like. We do provide a full range of vital programs, training, and services to resolve problems at the local level. And our technical assistance and financial assistance programs support local governments with revitalization, recovering, planning, and more. Again, the vast majority of technical assistances that are offered by our center come at no cost to the municipality. Shared services are something that we do find is a common pressure point for municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. So we do often look at regional police services. If you're interested, I will be sending you folks this presentation afterwards, so you can follow that link to learn more about that. regional fire and emergency service as well. So we do offer studies both for the regional police, fire, and EMS at no cost to municipality. I know that's a big one that you folks will probably be looking at with STAMP as well, so something to consider there as well. When it comes to planning too, community planning is often a big one. We do offer that technical and financial assistance to help with land use, revitalization, preservation, and infrastructure. You can follow that link there. And then strategic management program. Hopefully you folks are already familiar with that one. That's what we are entering in now. And that's really just to help you folks to get a good proactive plan so that you have a good idea of where your municipality is currently standing and where you can be going in the future. Financial Recovery, Act 47, something that we hope to keep municipalities out of, oftentimes through the STAMP program. Again, that is something that comes through our office. That is a program that we're keeping folks out of. So we're happy to see that use has been going down. Funding programs, MAP is a big one as well. These are grants that cover 50% eligible costs for community planning and shared services. You can do things like comprehensive plans, and then local government capital loan project. This is a 2% loan for purchasing equipment. You can get $50,000 for pieces of equipment for 5 years, or $100,000 for infrastructure upgrades, repairs. That's $100,000 for 15 years. Often we see that for things like salt sheds and what have you. So training references real quick before we get over to the home rule. I do find that a lot of folks do ask me this question when you're having people come on. If you have general questions, we do offer all these. There's a link there to our publications. There's more than 50 online publications for all aspects of local government that you could possibly think of. If you cannot find them on there, just give me a phone call directly and I'll be able to help get that for you. Some of what these look like here, you can see our whole library that houses all of these things, whether it's handbooks for different jobs, manuals for taxation, taxation collection, etc. Here are some other examples. And then finally, we'll find some more handbooks, guides, manuals, all online. And these things will be helpful as well as you're going through potentially the home rule process, where you can look up frequently cited municipal laws, codes, and those things. We do also offer training, core trainings. If you find folks in the administration who have questions about things like chart of accounts, budget and finance, ESA grants, all these great things we do offer and help at no cost to municipality. So other things here, you can share with your team as well if they're interested for some training. And these are some of the partners that we work with to do those great trainings, which I'm sure you are all very familiar with. Finally, just from reporting and e-filing forms, these are where most folks are familiar with the Governor Center and DCED. The annual audits, financial reports, survey of financial conditions, those annual reports that you get over to the state, those do come through our office. And then one last little quick plug here. We do have the Governor's Award for Local Government Excellence each year. So really it recognizes local governments and individuals that have found creative ways to improve their communities. Nominations open up in August. So if you have any projects that you felt were particularly standing out for the community, if you have members of your community who are really going above and beyond, we will be, in contact with you in August about those nominations opening up, and we hope to see you guys apply for that. Okay, so the reason we're here for today, home rule in Pennsylvania. It's something that we're really seeing a lot of communities asking us about information on, so I'm happy to share that with you all today. So an overview of home rule, it transfers the basic authority to act in municipal affairs from the state law to a local charter, which is drafted, adopted, and amended by municipal voters. Home rule charters provide a county or municipality with its own unique constitution rather than following state municipal codes, which often can be seen as like cookie cutter, really the standard. Many municipalities are turning to home rule for the revenue flexibility that can offer, as you can levy different rates for your taxes and look at different structures for your government, as we'll explore here shortly. The municipality can also retain portions of the existing municipal code structure that works, and they can kind of pick and choose what they like, alter what they don't like, and really find ways to make the charter for their community really tailored and fit the needs of their community, rather than, again, going to get that cookie cutter code book from the state. And the charters must be approved by the majority of municipal voters to be enacted, as we will discuss in this presentation. So some reasons for home rule that we do find common as we're visiting municipalities. They identify accountability. It can help with focused political leadership, professional administration. It is great for enhancing fiscal procedures and controls, which also leads to more transparency, responsibility. It gives you flexibility when you're looking at your current tax rates, which do have caps from the state that you can also look at changing. You can look at separating legislative and executive functions, as well as residual powers. You have the ability to write your own administrative code, which will stand alongside of the charter that you adopt, which you're able to more easily amend. Home rule we do also find increases citizen participation. So it really makes it so that you can run your community here locally at home and have more voter feedback and involvement with your local government here. We do find it increases responsiveness, and the idea is that it will lead to wider representation. So a quick history on home rule. The 1968 Commonwealth adopted Article 9, Section 2 of the PA Constitution, guaranteeing the right of all counties and municipalities to adopt home rule charters and exercise home rule powers. This law was enacted in 1907, making Pennsylvania a home rule state. Since 1972, home rule charters have been adopted by over 79 municipalities, as well as over 7 counties. There's some examples listed here. Two that come to mind that you folks may want to look more into as we'll talk is Altoona and Lancaster. They are nearby. I'm sure you have some relationships with some of the folks that work there as well. So, if you are going through the process or considering it, definitely looking at folks who have done it previously, I think is a good source of information. So some of the principles of home rule, you have the opportunity to shift governance from state municipal code to the local citizens here. It allows for flexibility in defining structure, powers, taxation, and other functions of the municipality. And it's an opportunity to create a government that best meets the needs of the municipality, again, rather than just operating from that cookie cutter from the state. Now, home rule municipalities may exercise powers or perform functions not denied by the U.S. Constitution, the PA Constitution, state laws, specific restrictions within Act 62, laws that are uniform and applicable in every part of the Commonwealth, as well as the home rule charter itself. So some examples that we can look at of those limitations here. I won't read them all, but you can review them. Some pretty obvious ones are things like election code, ethics law, reapportionment, sunshine law, open records law. These things obviously are limitations to what you still have to work within the boundaries of here. So home rule considerations, what you'll do once you start this process, and we'll look at what that timeline looks like, is really looking at different forms of government. So you'll study the current form of your government structure, and you'll look at what maybe other municipalities nearby are doing, others that have gone through home rule, and we'll look at different examples of that. Another thing that home rule will look at is taxation. So you'll look at real estate code limitations, operations and procedures, so how meetings are held, your public records, public hearings, your operating rules, as well as legislative actions, form of action by a governing body, publication, effective dates, ordinance, and codification. So we'll look at the structure of governing body, which could be set up as a council and appointed manager, or elected executive in a council. Some components of governing body that the home rule study may alter would be the size or the terms that they're serving, the qualifications that they need, prohibitions, whether they live here or not, for example, budgetary procedures, representation, whether it's going to be districts, whether it's going to be at large. Again, really, you're looking at your charter here, and you're making it to what you believe your voters want to see here in Williamsport, and what you can make it so that they're a little bit more engaged and participating in your local government. So some examples that we see common for home rule municipality structure options. One here is mayor elected independently as a council member. Mayor presides as a president of council. Council members appoint manager, solicitor, engineer. Council appoints board of commissioners, and the manager hires directors and employees. That's one common structure that we'll see. Another common one is mayor is a full-time position. Mayor is not a member of council. Mayor appoints boards and commissions. Mayor appoints manager with council consent, and manager appoints directors and employees. And then a third common example that we see as well is mayor position is actually eliminated, and the council appoints a manager, which oftentimes would be the mayor or essentially stand in for that position of the mayor. And then you have the solicitor engineer that is also appointed by council. Council appoint boards and commissions, and manager appoints directors and employees. So throughout the home rule process, this will be studied by what's called a government study commission, which will be served on by members of the community. And they will see what these different forms of government look like and what they consider would be the most effective here in Williamsport. So before we get to that process and timeline, one other important thing to note is taxation is something that gets looked at by home rule. It's not just the structure and form of the governments. You also look at taxation limits. So real estate tax currently is limited by PA legislation. Here you have 30 mills as your cap. With the home rule study, you may want to adopt in your charter so that you don't have that cap. This gives you a little bit of breathing room. Oftentimes, we'll find that this can offer relief for aging population when you're able to pull tax from elsewhere and things like that. So it's more modern, it's more efficient, based on municipalities' needs, and it provides for more quality services. When you have to pay for your fire, you have to pay for your police, but you just can't quite afford it. When you're able to restructure, move things around, you may be able to find a way to do that. All right, so now we'll look quickly at the home rule process and timeline. Now that we have a general overview of what the process can produce, what it'll be looking at, we want to kind of see what the process looks like if you are going to start it. So begin by forming a government study commission. Referendum will be placed on the ballot by ordinance of the governing body or 5% of electors in the last gubernatorial general election. The voters will be asked 2 questions: to elect a GSC or government study commission, to study existing forms of government, such as the 3 that we had just discussed, as well as home rule, and select electors on the ballot running for the government study commission, whether it's 7 members, 9 members, or 11 members, dependent on the ordinance that was passed. And if home rule fails to pass, the same question cannot be placed on the ballot as a referendum for 5 years. So if we were to consider, Williamsport possibly standing up the government study commission in 2025, these would be the hard dates that you folks would have to really be looking at and consider if they are realistic to be able to accomplish. So August 5th, 2025, within 13 Tuesdays before the November 4th election, that's the last date that everything can be filed with the County Bureau of Elections. June 17th, 2025, that's 20 Tuesdays before November 4th, the petitions for the government study commission candidates can be picked up. And by August 26th, 2025, which is 10 Tuesdays before November 4th, the petitions for the government study commission candidates must be filed. Again, this is just something if you folks wanted to say, hey, let's start getting this stood up now. We want to try to get it on the ballot. These are just the hard dates that you would have to hit. If you're looking to do it in 2026, they would get moved a little bit, obviously around, but the same principle still stands. It's the 13 Tuesdays before November 4th, 20 Tuesdays, and 10 Tuesdays. So the timeline, if the government study commission were to be stood up, within 10 days of the certification of elections, the government study committee elected members must take the oath. Within 15 days of the certification of election, the government study commission must organize and hold its first public meeting. And within 9 months of the certification, the GSC must determine no change or proceed with home rule. It is possible that they'll study the different forms of government. They'll study where your government stands right now and determine that no change is necessary. They still will produce a final report as to explain why that is. And that really would put an end to the government study commission there. Now, if home rule is recommended by the government study commission, the commission will then have 18 months from the election certification to draft a charter for referendum, which again would have to be voted on by the public as well. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I gave an example of home rule from Newcastle. So hopefully we can make it work a little bit here. So this is the time frame that they're working with. Let's put this up here. So right after the election there, November 4th, they had their organization meeting within 15 days of the certification of the election. Oath of office, like we had spoke about as well. Let's try to get that right there. Define the powers and duties of the study commission and its members, and a work plan within 18 months. So then they'll retain the professional consultant, and that'll be coming in December, March. So with you folks entering into the strategic management program, we do often find that they do recommend home rule as a consideration. So that being said, if you were to stand up the government study commission for this year, you could start to study that, what that form of government looks like, have your government study commission members go out and get those petitions signed and get it on the ballot. And then if it does pass and your consultants from STAMP do recommend it, then when it comes time to retain that professional consultant, you would be able to do that through the STAMP program. And with you folks being 10% paying into STAMP, that means that the state would cover 90% of that professional consultant. Average price we see for that is somewhere around $25,000 to $50,000. So again, you can start the government study commissions now and have your folks get ready to run for it. And by the time that, the work starts with that professional consultant who will be drafting the charter and possibly the city code book, then you can come to DCED for the funding to pay for that consultant. So once you retain that consultant, then throughout December and March, you'll see the study of the current government structure like we had discussed. interview local government officials and staff, identify alternative government structures, and study home rule charter DCED publications. If the decision about direction, home rule, or no change, if no change, you'll draft the final report no later than August 20th of that year to be submitted to the clerk and voters. And again, this is just the outline for like the work plan that we saw with Newcastle. So you can see what it looks like once you actually started. If home rule charter is chosen, then they draft the home rule charter. And this process can take anywhere from 9 months to 18 months. They are pretty lengthy documents. You're essentially rewriting, how you're running your local government here. What's nice about it though is that you're not really recreating the wheel. You're really going to be using the Pennsylvania Municipal Code book, picking what you like, looking at other examples of similar sized municipalities such as Lancaster and seeing what theirs looks like. And again, these consultants have done a handful of these home rule charters here. So they'll be very familiar with the process to help you through it. And then you'll review and discuss the home rule charter. You'll hold public meetings, at least 3, meet with city officials, consultants, local government experts to review and draft the charter. And then your consultants will prepare and write the final report. You'll provide the charter, final report, and form of questions to the County Board of Elections no later than March 12th of 2021, so that they're able to get it on the ballot. And then come March, they have the final home rule charter and final report. And then you move into referendum on the ballot for May 18th for the primary election. Develop and distribute public education material, schedule and hold public outreach meetings, and the commission works with referendum is either approved or rejected by voters. So I still will say that is one thing. It's a lot of public education. It's a lot of speaking with folks, making sure they know what's going on. We found the city of Lancaster had a lot of success by using a YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and look up Lancaster City, they have a whole playlist there so you folks can see what those meetings look like once the Government Study Commission actually starts meeting. They have all of it broken down really, really well. So again, any questions, if you wanted to see generally what that looks like, that is a great resource, and I will absolutely share that with you all. Implementation. So the municipality shall be governed under the provision of the plan from the first Monday in January following the municipal election occurring after the next succeeding primary election, except as provided in section 2924C. So essentially, come January, if it does pass on the charter, that's how quickly you'd be starting to operate under that. And then you'll write the administrative code as the companion to the document to the home rule charter to provide guidance and context to the home rule charter. And what I particularly like about this process is it can be adopted and amended by ordinance rather than referendum. So the two will stand aside one another, which does make things a little bit easier to operate and make adjustments there. And then obviously you have your codification of your ordinances as well. And then again, this is just some general information, resources. If you guys have any questions, obviously you have my contact information, but the DCED website is there as well as our direct number. As I mentioned before, other home rule municipalities that I believe you would benefit to looking into a little bit would be Lancaster and Altoona. PML also has a home rule advocacy committee. League of Women Voters, college universities often do studies on these things as well. So if you're interested in that, we can help pull some of those publications. International City and County Management Association. And then finally, carefully consider where your information is coming from. It may be wise to use multiple sources to help ensure that a sound charter is produced. Again, DCED will be working alongside your consultant and with you folks throughout that process. So if you have any questions throughout that, we're more than happy to help. And that's really an overview of the home rule. I know it's a lot of information. I'll leave my contact information there. And then open it up now to city council members as well as the public for questions.
Jonas, thank you for that very much. On the agenda, I have questions, comments from the general public first. Happy to keep it that way, but if I guess the members of the public that are here would maybe feel more comfortable with us kind of going through and asking additional questions for you, so you can digest some things more before, I'm happy to switch that around. I see a couple heads nodding yes. Okay, cool. So let's go to questions from council members. I know a number of people were making notes. I've got a couple of mine, but I'll just open the floor for questions from members. Whoever wants to go first. I'm happy to. It doesn't matter. Okay. Can you turn your mic on? That's all right.
I pulled up Lancaster's home rule chart to sort of have a
Okay.
look what that looked like. So I was just
Let me ask. Yeah, We'll let Eric go first then.
So one of the biggest problems that we have right now and why we went back to this home rule charter idea was because we need to figure out ways that we can increase revenue in the city, but also not rely solely on property taxes.
Absolutely.
So can you explain to us what some of those benefits of taxation are? And you already mentioned property taxes and not relying specifically when you have an aging population in your community, which we have in Williamsport. We also have a very large number of nonprofits in our community. I believe it's 40% of our land in the city is owned by nonprofits. And then you've got another high percentage that are rental properties as well because of two colleges being here.
Mm.
So what would we as a city council and just as a community be looking at as revenue generating options for a home rule charter?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So, when we look at the real estate tax, we will say that's a common problem across the state where folks are struggling with that because of the cap. So when you're looking at the home rule charter, to put it bluntly, that cap is removed. Now, obviously, you're not going to go right to raising your property taxes right away. And we also look at other home rule communities that often don't do that. Oftentimes, we don't see that they do change their taxes right away. It's just the ability to, so they have breathing room. But to answer your question specifically, one that we do find is very successful is earned income tax. So those folks are already working, obviously you don't want to raise your taxes on your seniors who are on a fixed income. But even if you're able to just get a little bit of breathing room to earn that, increase that EIT a little bit, as well as real estate transfer tax, that's another one that can be adjusted as well with the home rule. But you're also going to be looking at things like land use. You're also going to be looking at things like your ordinances. You're going to be considering, who's doing your rental inspections, who's doing your landlord registry, making sure that, blight's dealt with, that people are, here that are working are actually reporting that income and it's going back to you folks. So, off the top of my head, the one that I do look at right away when I hear about creating revenue through other taxes would be the earned income tax.
If I could just chime in real quickly, I live in the city of Lancaster, actually. So we just went through this process in my hometown and focusing on not raising property taxes was one of the main things that the mayor really championed as part of the home rule process. As Jonas mentioned, and as you mentioned as well, it's a heavily used tax. So the county uses the property tax, school districts, the city as well. We did look at earned income tax with the city of Lancaster, not just because, as Jonas mentioned, it could be perceived as more equitable because it's a tax on wage earners, not on people with fixed incomes that own homes, but also almost across the board, we see more natural growth within the earned income tax. So you don't have to keep raising taxes necessarily if you can rely on a tax that has more natural organic growth within it. It's really hard to get your property taxes to grow year after year. A lot of times that's contingent on a property tax or a property value reassessment, which depending on what county you're in, could not have happened in quite a long time.
Correct.
You mean like since 2004?
Okay, 20 years. That's not the worst, but that's certainly a long time. Best practices may be around 10 years. But to really get your accurate property values to set your millage correctly, you need that reassessment. So it's hard to get natural organic property tax growth, whereas almost everybody's wages generally, just to keep up with inflation, cost of living will have some natural organic growth within it.
So this is more of a broad question that I have, and with those benefits that you have with home rule through the earned income tax and the real estate transfer tax, has there been any conversation at the state level or even at the governor's level, not just the legislature, to make that a wholesale change within third-class city code?
That's a bit above my grade. I'll pass it there.
Good one.
I believe it's a concept that's been talked about for decades, but I don't think it's ever really seen the chance of it getting across the finish line. So it's not, honestly, the latest I heard was they might be looking at a local services tax increase and not an earned income tax increase in terms of municipal tax reform. But I mean, just to be very candid, it's not something that cities can wait around for,
Right.
for the General Assembly to act. They need to sort of take the horse by the reins and make these decisions for themselves in the meantime. Because I would say you can't really hang your hat on the possibility of municipal tax reform.
If, just to comment on that too, and this has nothing to do with the rest of that, but I would think the General Assembly shouldn't be able to wait for cities to go into Act 47, so they have to continue to bail them out. I mean, it's the dog wagging the tail, so to speak, but tail wagging the dog, excuse me, but you know, that is what it is.
I'll second that here.
Yeah.
Ms. Mealy, it seemed like you had a couple questions before I look at the.
I just wanted to ask if there were any other open areas of taxation like split. I think Williamsport looked into this once about a decade ago and decided it wasn't a route we wanted to take, but like a split taxation between land value and improvement value. Or is anything like that opened up a little bit more by home rule versus current municipal law, or is it relatively equal?
Liz, can you get closer to your mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Not that I'm familiar with, but possibly Andrew, maybe.
I think that's something the city can already do within the
Right.
powers that they have, you know, to split between land and improvements, just like you said.
Got it. And there aren't, I guess I'm just asking, there aren't any other areas that are broadened aside from EIT, real estate transfer and I think at least this council and the administration has shown a pretty intense commitment to not increasing property taxes and certainly not over 30 mils. So just asking if there are other avenues that open up there. And then looking at other sort of possible amendments, I know that there are a handful of different forms of government proposed. To what extent is that part of any home rule charter, and to what extent? I know when we looked into this a number of years ago, and it's possible the law has even changed. There was a question that one could put on the ballot related to form of government, and a question that one could put on the ballot related to home rule. But form of government is somewhat within the home rule question as well. That is to say that would be within the scope of the commission regardless.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And all options then are open, like the strong council, strong mayor.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what the Government Study Commission will be doing. They'll explore the benefits, cost benefit analysis of each and really see what works best for here in Williamsport.
And to what extent, I think this is maybe more a question for those of us who are interested in seeing home rule be considered by Williamsport. What kind of a time commitment are you seeing on the part of the commissioners who take on this?
Yeah,
home rule
that's
commission?
a great question. So we do find that, once they do, the process does take, roughly 18 months. So it does go on pretty long. Whether they're meeting bi-weekly or monthly, I think we'd have to sit down and really speak with some of the other communities. I believe Lancaster is doing monthly. But in terms of those meetings, I think they last maybe 2 hours, but who knows, outside of that, the amount of legwork they're doing. I strongly advise, if you have relationships with those folks, to speak with anybody in Lancaster. And I'd be happy to set up a meeting for us all to speak with that a little bit.
I don't think that any of us, I can speak for myself. I know that I don't have a relationship with anyone who was part of the Government Study Commission in Lancaster, and it would certainly be an interesting thing to discuss.
Yeah, more than happy to set up that meeting.
I mean, I know from my experience on council that the biweekly meetings are not really the end of, that I think
That's right.
members of council put varying amounts of effort, and it certainly varies depending on the meeting outside of the meeting itself. But I wasn't certain because of the potential for a consultant in this case. I wasn't certain how much of that outside legwork was
So
generally handled by a consultant.
we do often find the consultant will be doing a lot of the reporting and the drafting and that the research there. And then the input will be coming from the members of the Government Study Commission. So they do obviously help with that capacity a bit. I will say one of the large lifts for the Government Study Commission members is helping to really educate the public about what they're doing, as well as for members of council. That's a big one. And again, doing that through things like online campaigns, videos on YouTube and all that, just to really help inform the voters, is something we found is successful. And again, at the end of the day, it is up to the voters to pass it. So I think that's the way to success.
And it sounds as though, generally speaking, one of the secondary routes to success is to vote to adopt the home rule charter significantly in advance of the election in which it would appear on the ballot. At least it looked to me, it seemed like, it looked like Lancaster had about a 4-month lead time, Newcastle had
yep,
about a
that's
3-month
about- yep.
lead time. And that gives you, it would seem like a significant opportunity because you have a finished document. So you're not talking about the possibilities, you're talking about the realities, correct?
That's right.
All right. All right, Adam, do you have anything?
Can you circle back one second, Vince, to Liz's question, I think, on the tax piece of this, because I'm not sure you answered her question. Liz, I think you were asking about, are there specific taxes we currently levy that don't get the caps eliminated? Or were you asking, are there additional taxes we're able to levy? Like,
I was sort of asking all of that, if there were
Okay.
additional opportunities, whether by
Okay.
eliminating caps or by,
So 2 questions. I think what she was asking. Number one, are there any taxes as a part of the home rule process where the caps are not eliminated?
Local services tax, I believe, would be one. That could not be higher than the cap is set. And then I could go back to some of the examples of things that you still cannot change on the PowerPoint, but in terms of taxes, really the big ones that we do see would be the real estate tax, earned income tax, and real estate transfer tax.
And those are the ones that are, the caps are eliminated.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay,
and the caps are completely eliminated.
that's correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think the second part of her question, are there additional taxes that we would be able to implement that we currently are not allowed to? So for example, the question I always either got when I was first running for office or get now is, why don't you guys just put a sales tax out there?
Right.
Well, we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, so you do still have to operate underneath the general assemblies. Like I can go back to
Right.
some of the things that you have to operate within still, and that would be one of them. When you're looking at limitations.
So the menu of tax revenue streams does not change.
Yeah, and I can get you an example
that
of
was-
what that looked
right.
like. I think
Okay.
maybe that would be helpful to add to this PowerPoint. Exactly.
I think that's what you were
That, yeah,
trying to
that
get
was
at.
really what I was, right,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
But
you.
not very adroitly, so thank you for.
Mr. Plizzi, did I see you had a question?
I have a couple.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Well, first off, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here and for presenting this. This is something that Councilman Yoder, we've been working on for quite a few years. The first thing I'm going to ask is, I want to follow up on Councilman Biter's question. So within his question, he informed you that approximately 40%, if we want to get specifically technical, I think, Kevin, it's about 38.79%, correct? Yeah. About 40% of our city's taxable real estate is off the tax roll due to ownership and acquisition by nonprofits and 501c3 entities. By going to home rule, does that open up any other options or availabilities to the city then to garner more fiscally sustainable relationships, any other income streams or sources from those institutions?
The first thing that comes to mind, I believe, would be pilot. Payment in lieu of taxes can be approached for them. I'm sure the conversation's been held already, but again, when you're coming into this process and you're really looking at restructuring your government and where those tax revenues are coming from, that would be a good time that we find municipalities sit down and really have that hard conversation. So pilot's one that comes to mind. Andrew, I'm not sure if any of the others come to mind for you.
I mean, there is a process, I'm not an expert, but there's a process where nonprofit status can be reviewed. And even the activity occurring on those parcels of land, it can be reviewed whether or not it's actually a nonprofit use of that parcel.
Correct. It has to meet the 5 pillars or the 5 standards of
Yeah.
for nonprofit purposes, correct?
Yeah, a good example is churches. We do often find folks, will have the churches turned into homes and they'll go 5, 6, 7 years and then not paying taxes on it. So going through and really getting those properties checked, you might find that some people are falling through the cracks.
But that's not something made available by home rule, correct? It's simply something that's available to us at this point.
That's correct. Yeah.
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 But the home rule is a good catalyst for bringing a lot of change here. And so
Yeah.
it helps you really to revisit those conversations and maybe look at them from a new perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
The big one for me, and we've mentioned this quite a few times in the past too, is our absolute dire need to regionalize our public safety services. We certainly need to do that. And in the past, whenever we inquired about it, we were always told this is too hard to do. Are you able to elaborate a little bit and educate us and the community as far as what that looks like? And kind of give us an approximate idea of how much time that takes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very fair question. It's a very common question. I will say, as the Northeast Local Government Policy Specialist, I visit over, 300 different municipalities in the Northeast, from your wonderful county up to Tioga, Wayne, Northampton, Lackawanna, Luzerne. It is one of the most common pressure points that we find in municipalities. Oftentimes it's reaching well over 50% of their budget. And we all know it's very, very expensive. But that being said, we're not just going to let houses burn down in your municipalities. And if there's a neighboring municipality who has a house going and, no one's reacting to it, you're going to do it. You're not just going to allow it to burn. So that's where the regionalization studies that we do at the Governor's Center do come in handy. That can be done outside of STAMP, outside of home rule. It's something that we have a whole team here that looks at that regionalization. It is something I've been speaking with the mayor and their administration about as well, because they are alluding to it being a pressure point. So I'm absolutely happy to send that document over to you folks. We have a whole website for it. I'll go back a little bit to that link as well. Again, it comes at no cost to the municipality, and essentially what it does is it will look at your calls for your local emergency services, and it'll look at where you're visiting. Let's see where it is there. They'll look at where you're visiting, as well as what compensation you're getting for it, and they'll see if that compensation is equitable, and if it's not, then they can give you some suggestions of what maybe you can ask the municipality to contribute. Oftentimes we will find that folks will have your larger class 3 cities kind of spearhead that regionalization effort. So really wouldn't, draw down your forces here, but you may just spread them out a little bit more and get compensation for it. We are currently doing a regionalization study right now in Lycoming County, just outside of here, with a couple of municipalities that are going through our office. So more than happy to share that document with you folks. It's something that we're very near and dear with.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
I have one, but I'll defer to my other two colleagues to my left before I dive into that, if there are any forefront. Mr. House.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up on the question of regionalization. In the other narrative that you mentioned earlier, the regional fire and emergency services, and below that, or above that rather, regional police services. That it is a complicated matter because locally here we have contracts already in place, and it's difficult to coordinate that kind of thing. But were you saying the state could help us in that effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So through the Governor's Center, what they'll do is look at your current contracts. They won't be able to retroactively change what has already been done, or your pension payouts that already been given, or disabilities, what have you. But moving forward, what they can do is help you to A, shop around for insurance if it's been a while since you've looked at different insurance providers. B, look at your pension plan. And then as time goes on and you start to have some of those folks who were on the old plans kind of going off, then you'll start to see a little bit of your costs being adjusted from that. I will say through the stamp process that will be done automatically. You won't have to go through the regionalization. They will be looking at that as one of their recommendations, which means that we would be able to fund it through stamp as well. But yeah, I think regionalization, again, is a big ticket item for most municipalities, and it's something that we are more than happy to look into.
Yeah, and it's been discussed for a long time. Several years ago, we had a meeting in this building here about fire regionalization. And somebody from the state was here. I can't remember who it was, but the suggestion at that point was, and I'm probably talking about 8 years ago, 10 maybe, that the state was seriously looking to make changes, and that in fact it would be imperative to go from to consolidate the fire services, those who are traditional, full-time with the volunteers because of the lack of bodies in the volunteer force and the cost for everybody else who already has a force in place with a contract. Is there any, to your knowledge, is there any discussion about that going on in the state?
So I will say volunteerism is certainly a pressure point that we find across the Commonwealth,
Mhm.
absolutely. But in terms of any sort of mandates for how the structures have to be coming down from the state, that's not something I've heard of being made. I have heard different discussions about looking at, restructuring and maybe making it so municipalities can raise some millage for fire, et cetera. But in terms of mandating that volunteer full-time position, I haven't heard that. I'm not sure if you have, Andrew. No.
Okay, I understand that. It just, this is there's certain things, and I'm all in favor of the home rule. I think it's going to be helpful. But some of the real structural changes that we need as a third-class city are above our ability to affect those changes. And it's somewhat discouraging that, we're going to be looking at how we can change things here, adopt things there, and it will be a lot more helpful and a lot more, I think, transparent for the citizens. But it's just my feeling that until we get some actual discussion and movement from the state, we're kind of hamstrung in some ways. But okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah,
Please.
hi, how are you? I was actually on the Government Study Commission 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now, I guess, that we did it here.
17, 18?
Yeah, well, a little less, yeah. Kind of what got me started in
Ish.
this line of work. But when we talk about that consultant, and again, it was a while ago, I don't specifically remember us having the services of a consultant. Is that across the board you get one, or how does that work? Because I tend to remember some of the folks who were a little bit more involved than I was. I hate to say that, but they actually did a lot of that work themselves, I feel like. So how do we make sure that the people who are on this commission are getting the support?
Absolutely.
that
No,
they
that is a very good question. So we will say not all consultants can be said to be the same. But what we will do is give you a list of suggested consultants that we know that have done this work before in the region, that are familiar with it. Obviously, you can go with whomever you want, but we will give you some examples of folks. I would say the biggest lift that consultants will do would be the actual drafting up of the charter itself and the city code book, both of which are quite large documents. What they bring to that obviously is the legal process as well to make sure that everything is checking all the boxes that need to be checked legality wise. But in terms of having them involved in the meetings, that is a good question. From my understanding is that they were heavily involved in them. I'm sorry to hear in your experience that they were not. But one of the things that we do recommend you do when you're looking for your consultants is sitting down and interviewing with them. So you put out your RFP, you'll maybe hear back from 5 or 6. Looking at them for quality as well as cost. And then when you're sitting down and interviewing with them, I do ask they invite me, and we'll make sure that you're asking the right questions. And one of those questions can be just that, how involved will you be? When should we expect to see you? What will your duties be, et cetera? And then really throughout that interview process, hopefully we'll be able to find a consultant who fits well.
And then we as a council decide the number of people that will be on that committee. Yes, 7, 9.
Yeah, so when it comes to the question here in the fall, you'll determine if you want it to be 7 members, 9 members, or 11 members. And then it's really up to the voters to decide on the vote there.
Okay. And I know a lot of the conversations revolving around tax revenue. Are there any other, I don't know, original or unique things that we can do in terms of local laws or anything like that? Or is that all pretty, because correct me if I'm wrong, Philadelphia is a home rule charter city? Are they kind of their own?
Yeah, they are technically, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and did they decriminalize marijuana in Philadelphia? Is that?
I don't believe so, but I'm not certain.
I'm not entirely sure. They're also a first-class city.
Right.
So it affords them all sorts of other
Okay,
avenues and
Alright.
powers.
To merge with their county too,
Philly-
right? Like they're
Williamsport.
just,
Yeah,
they're
that's-
they're just a unique animal all in themselves, right?
Yeah.
Their county cities all the same thing. First class, anyway, sorry, John.
But they're
No, no,
still
that-
landlocked and they still can't annex their municipalities immediately outlying.
but that is not something that we could do as a home rule charter city.
No, I mean, that would be probably federal law and state law. That the things you can't change through home rule process are the things that, the specific things that Jonas went over, but also laws that are meant to be applicable, and uniform across the Commonwealth.
Right.
And I would suspect that certain criminality things related to marijuana would go back to uniform and,
Okay.
you know, broadly applicable across the Commonwealth.
Could you give I'm just curious, could you give an example of maybe one of the more unique things that
Yeah,
you've
sure.
seen
So-
Altoona or Lancaster?
Yeah, one example would be like deciding which positions in your local government would be elected and which wouldn't be. For example, whether it's your chief of police or your treasurer or your tax collector. We do often find that's one where municipalities will kind of change it up to see how they want to do it. That's something I think unique that comes to mind for me. But really, I mean, when you're sitting down and looking at, the Pennsylvania Municipal Code book, what we often find folks will do is go through that and pick what makes sense and what they really like. And then they'll start exploring ways to get creative. And that's where the consultants come in who have kind of really already experienced it and seen it, and they kind of lead you through that process. So again, it's a great question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but if you are looking at your consultants, that is one of the questions you can absolutely ask them.
Okay.
So John
Go
wants to do
ahead.
something wild and crazy if we're doing home rule.
You can change the name to something if you want. You can there's a lot of different things you can do, but
Um,
Go ahead.
no, I agree. I think I would like, I feel as though I've been advocating for home rule for quite a while without understanding the full ramifications of the possibilities therein. But I think, one quick question I'd have actually, in the opposite direction is, well, I'm trying to understand a little bit better what would qualify as a referendum sort of action under a home rule charter, and what would qualify as like an ordinance voted on by members of city council.
yeah, absolutely. So it really depends on what falls into your home rule charter itself as versus what falls into your city code. So let's see if I have examples of that on here. So for example, like when you're going to be changing the components of your governing body, the size of your council, for example, the terms that folks serve on and all that, I believe that would be adopted in your charter. So for that, it would be a little bit harder to change rather than things that are just in your municipal code book or city code book. Things like ordinances and I believe things like that. Those are
Could
the two that
we,
come to mind for me.
if it became a flashpoint, could we do something like within the home rule charter itself, set a cap on real estate tax millage?
Yeah, that you guys can set your own cap. Yeah, so you just
Okay.
remove the state caps essentially.
Okay.
You guys can choose what you want.
And
that
then
to
that
be.
would be something that we'd have to engage in a referendum to modify.
That's correct.
Okay. But basically, looking at the elements of, looking at the changes that Lancaster made, I'm not seeing a huge number of changes, a lot of changes governing how the budget's presented, John, and how the budget's handled, the creation of an enforced capital budget process, which we have in place, but I don't know to the extent to which it's codified within our ordinance. Certainly it's not codified within our charter.
It's
So we could-
codified. There's really no good way for us to enforce it. I mean,
Right,
They're supposed
exactly.
to, the administration's supposed to put forward a capital budget in May for us to go through, but it doesn't happen and it's just
Right,
done through
becomes part
the
of
budget
it,
process,
right.
which is not bad, but I mean,
Yeah,
how long do we talk about capital budget during budget process?
right,
10 minutes,
yeah.
right? Where we
exactly.
should be having a solid, probably half hour, 45-minute strategic conversation. So
Yeah, right.
like I could
exactly.
see a clear benefit
Right.
there,
To
for example,
increasing, right. I think there's a clear benefit there. I think there's also a clear benefit to contemplating different positions elected versus appointed elements, controller, treasurer,
Yeah.
et cetera, you know. I'm not saying that we necessarily would opt to make changes, but I think that could be a huge positive for us. And obviously the taxation elements, I think are big positives. I'm grateful that we are nowhere near that 30 mil cap one way or the
Yeah.
other, but I think the other taxation elements,
are
the
there.
transfer
We're
taxes,
not
yeah,
close.
exactly. And so that would be huge. Then I'm trying to think, and I'm just trying to think, and this may not be a question you can answer right now, but I'd be interested in the answer in the long run. Have other home rule municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania made amendments to their charter? If so, what amendments have those been? I guess I'm just curious to know. I mean, that's a pretty major undertaking.
Yeah, that is a good question.
you know.
I'm happy to look into it.
Okay, yeah. And I'm curious just to know to what extent you are wise to get it right the first time if you're going to get it there, because I'm guessing it is really hard to convince the voters they need to go in and amend that home rule charter after the fact.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
If I can kind of maybe piggyback on, I think something that Liz was mentioning about Lancaster and their budget process. One of the, benefits, reasons that were noted in here were enhancing fiscal procedures and controls. I think you're probably getting the strong sense that there's a lot of financial revenue, components that are driving, I think, council's interest in this process specifically, right? Can you dive into some detail as to what some common things come out of that benefit for following a home rule process? Like, I mean, I know Liz mentioned that budgetary one, for example, from Lancaster, but what are some additional examples? 'Cause I think that's an area that can be pretty fruitful for the city as well.
Yeah, I think just to speak generally to it first, it is really using that example of the budget. It's something that a lot of municipalities would like to be done, but it hasn't been getting done. So with this, it gets in writing. It's how it's supposed to be done. It has to be done that way. Instead of it just being kind of like word of mouth understanding, it kind of gives you some teeth to some of these things. I think that's really where it adds a lot of it. But in terms of specifics, none really come to mind for me. I'm not sure about you, Andrew.
Yeah, just going back to Lancaster, I believe there's also a requirement for a quarterly financial presentation from the administration to help with transparency and finances. But also as the councilwoman alluded to, and as was being discussed, there's certain elements to the budget process. I believe the budget process has to start earlier. And the mandating of the capital improvement plan as well.
And that is factored into the charter. Is that correct? So the fact that it's in the charter gives it more teeth than if it was just a local law via
That's
like
right.
an ordinance is essentially when you talk about enhancing that, gives it the stronger backing, right?
That's correct. It gives them some teeth. And to Andrew's point as well, I know in the city of Scranton, they do budget versus actual every 2 weeks. That's something that they got out of that strategic management program and that they're really starting to implement. So again, just like finding like-minded common sense solutions to common problems. When you have these consultants come in who have done this before, they're going to be able to help you study all these other charters that have been done for similar sized cities. And you might have those aha moments. You're like, oh, we haven't thought about doing that. That would be great here. But it also may give you a means to doing some of the things that you've always talked about that you just never really got over the finish line.
Smealy.
Of note, one of the things in Lancaster's home rule charter is that they are not allowed to spend more than they take in a given year.
That's a good one.
That is not currently a part of our city budgetary process.
Again, common sense solution to something, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Um, can I ask a quick question about, I saw on your list of prohibited changes, if you will, zoning changes, what Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code always takes precedence over anything. Yeah, I mean.
That's right. Yep. So
right.
essentially you'll be adopting parts of the PMC, but there's the PMPC, but there's parts that you can't leave out.
Okay. Oh, but there are parts that you can leave out?
Well, so I think you adopt it as is, I suppose. No, I guess you can't. It's the municipal code book that I was thinking of that you kind of
Okay.
cherry pick. But no, I believe you do have to adopt that as it is. That's my
Okay.
understanding.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're looking to make any major changes, but I was trying to think of, I think a lot of those are probably open to the city. It's been a while since I messed around with zoning heavily. It's been a while since. I
Yeah, and
did that.
again, with the stamp process as well, that's a very, very big ticket item that we do often tackle with it is comprehensive plans. So looking at your land use, your ordinance, your zoning. And again, what's nice about that is the state is going to be covering a big part of that. So it kind of takes the
Got it.
financial burden.
So
off
that
of
would be
you.
a recommendation.
It
we
almost
could
certainly
vote
will be a
out of
recommendation from state,
stamp.
yes, yep.
'Cause I
Especially
think-
if it's been at least over 10 years since you've had the last comp plan done, then
I don't
it's very
believe the
likely.
city's had a comp plan in the entire time that I mean, we did a comp plan for the county. And I think the city kind of got wrapped into that as like a sub, you
Okay.
know? Right, Randy? We've never, to my knowledge, amended a comp plan if one exists, and I'm not certain one does.
Yeah, I would say next to technology, that is one of the biggest things that we would be looking at in the stamp program. And again, as long as consultants recommend it, you have 5 years to go in for the implementation funding from DCED to begin that work on that project.
Got it. If I can ask a quick question then, if I'm not dominating the floor too much, about implementation of potentially putting the home rule question on the ballot. Well, two things, I think. In your experience, what has had more success? If it's driven by citizens, if it's driven by local government? Is there one that has been more successful than the other if the citizens put the question on the ballot versus?
I would say the heavy lift at the very beginning is going to be the local government because the majority of local citizens are going to have no idea what the home rule is or why it's beneficial. So yeah, at the start, we do often find it is. But then I think a lot of the times you will have your local citizens who want to get engaged on it, maybe even want to run for the government study commission and serve on it and be advocates for it. And really any members that you are looking to have run for that government study commission, first and foremost, that should be something that they're willing to do is getting out and doing that public outreach, that public information, whether it's on their own social media pages or local coffee shops, universities with flyers, things like that, holding information sessions, things like that. So I'd say it's a little bit of both, but I really think it's up to the individual municipality and the structure
Okay,
there.
so there's not one strategy.
No, I'd say at the beginning, though, it almost certainly is going to be the local government that's going to be leading it.
Got it. And it sounds as though, would you make, if this were something Williamsport wanted to pursue, would you make a recommendation of one over the other for us to sort of attempt to move to put this on the ballot as early as November, or to wait for the stamp recommendation and then move to maybe do something like this? I mean, I've been pro home rule for a long time, so I would love to see us put this on the ballot as soon as possible, but I'm trying to understand the wisdom of different timelines. If we thought about putting it on the ballot next May versus this coming November versus even next November, to my way of thinking, we certainly don't want to conflict with a national election on the ballot. A national November election, there's just a lot of, it changes the voting population in a way that I think it would be harder maybe to reach out to all those voters.
Absolutely. So again, these are the hard dates that I have here for this year. It would be the 13 Tuesdays before this November 4th election. And that would be to stand up the Government Study Commission for them to begin that process. So it really depends on whether you folks think that there's enough of an appetite for your citizens to be able to get engaged with it this quickly, because again, by June 17th, the petitions have to get picked up. I believe they need 100 signatures. Is that correct?
Yeah, so yeah, you can pick up petitions, just to go over this really quickly. You can pick up petitions by June 17th, but you can only circulate petitions between August 5th and August 26th. Between the
I was wondering
13th,
about that.
between the
That was like a
13th
real long
Tuesday
circulation
and the 10th
Okay.
Tuesday is the only time available
So
to
it has to
actually,
be officially.
actually
open
circulate the
before you can
petition.
Circulate a petition for it.
Right,
So-
they have to know this is coming, and then the folks will circulate the nomination papers.
Got it.
So in terms of doing it this year or waiting, one other piece to consider is the strategic management program. Again, it takes about 6 to 8 months for your consultants to come up with that final report that will list recommendations for the city. All those recommendations, as I said, are fundable from DCED for 5 years. So there is possibly some merit to waiting to get that final report before deciding to do this. Because again, that consultant is anywhere from 25 to 50,000. So there is some merit to maybe waiting to be certain that the consultants recommend it. But I will say through the stamp process that it almost will certainly be recommended from home rule. I have talked to your consultant specifically about it. He said that he's looking at the data still, that he can't say one way or the other. But it is something that will likely be on there, but there's no guarantee.
Mhm.
But again, this is the time frame that you have to work with. Again, it's all about, if you can get folks who are interested in doing the government study commission, making sure that they're actually willing to be engaged throughout the whole process, and informing the community. And if you really have the time for the lift at this time, again, with coming into the strategic management program, I will say there will be a little bit more of a lift there too from the municipality having to work through that. That's mostly gonna be on the administrative side. But just something to keep in mind, doing the two at the same time will maybe lend to a little bit more work.
If I can make a real quick request, I'll go to you, Eric. When you send us this, would you be so kind as to put the initial date when people could actually circulate petitions
Yeah,
on here?
absolutely. Certainly.
I think that might help clear that up. Mr. Miter.
So one of the other problems that we have, I mentioned about nonprofits and whatnot, again, which they're wonderful and they provide a great service to the community, specifically the two colleges that we have. But Pennsylvania has a very unique option for cities as well to adopt a land value tax. It's something that I've taken a lot of interest in and done some research on. Do we have to adopt the home rule charter before we can adopt a land value tax, or is that something that we can look at separately?
I believe you can do it separately, right?
Yeah,
Yes, yep.
yeah, that's my understanding as well. We could probably send you some examples of cities that currently have a land value tax.
Okay.
Just for information, perhaps outreach. And I think even Harrisburg does that. And
And-
who's not home rule. So
Harrisburg is a great example. They
Yeah.
had to stop that for when they went into distress. I believe the state made them stop their use of a land value tax, but what they adopted it for was specifically to combat blighted property and vacant lots within their city limits. And that is something that we have to seriously look at as a municipality. If we want to continue to raise tax revenue and spur development, we need to look at where our vacant lots are and why development is not happening there. And when we have, I would say once every 2 months, we have Kevin Mackey, our city treasurer, come before us because the county voted to reassess something because the building is more dilapidated, but yet it sits in a prime downtown location. I mean, this would help combat that issue that we face, unfortunately, all too often.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mackey.
Sorry,
No worries.
not going to keep beating this horse, but just to be clear, Philadelphia did decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. They made it a civil. No, I mean you're laughing about this, right? But when you talk about saving money, right, and you talk about revenue stream, sure, it becomes a civil offense up to a certain amount. What it also does is prevents that police officer from having to go through the arrest process, taking them off the street for several hours at a time, as opposed to just writing what is essentially a parking ticket, which I think we all know. Never mind. I won't say that joke, but anyway, so my point is, I think these are some of the other kind of unique things that home rule charter would offer us, the ability to get creative and say, okay, how do we give back our police officers some of their time? Right. So anyway.
No, it is a very valuable point. I mean, oftentimes folks will call this how to run my home. That's what the home rule is. It's how do you rule your home? And when you're looking at your local government here, I think there's no better folks to do that than the people who live within it and see it and breathe it every single day.
Mr. Pelosi.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jonas, in your presentation, you gave 3 different examples of home rule structure of government. In your experience, both of you two gentlemen, have you seen more of a favor of one specific structure over the others? And if so, why?
That's a great question. Really, it comes down to the municipality itself, what they feel like it needs to be run as. I can't say that there's one model that works for everybody. And that's why this government study commission is good, because it can study to see which ones they feel be the most effective. So, to answer your question, I can't really say one's better than the other. I think they all have pros and they all have cons. And through doing the government study commission, that's where you'll be able to look at that data and flesh it out and to make an informed decision.
And if I may, I have one more question. Earlier, you had said that you had already spoken to the consultant that would end up being, I guess, attached to Williamsport if we end up moving forward with the study and.
I'm sorry, that would be for STAMP, for the strategic
Yeah,
management.
I apologize, yes. Why is it that you think that home rule would definitely, or why is it that you believe home rule would be a recommendation?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So as I had alluded to earlier in the presentation, over 79 municipalities at this point have gone into home rule. And there's a reason for that. It really often does come down to the property tax cap, as well as the different limitations that you have set from the state government. We often will call it the cookie cutter. They work for most, but not for all. And so when you're able to go down and really look at brass tacks, what's coming in, what's going out, where can we maybe use a little bit of different restructuring? Where can we save money? Where can we get a little bit leaner and meaner? That's where this process will hopefully bring you through.
Okay, thank you.
If the group is okay with this, I want to take an opportunity to maybe invite the public to ask questions. I think we've thrown a lot out there, and we can certainly maybe ask for if any come to our minds, but to be conscious of the public's time if they need to leave. They wanted to invite members if they to come on up if they have any kind of questions. We can keep going as well, but I know there's a few members of the public here, so yeah. Yeah, yeah, microphone, if you would come up, name, address for the record. Absolutely.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonah Milliken. I live at 123 Upland Road. First time caller, long time listener. Thank you guys for coming to Williamsport to share this information with us. As a resident of Williamsport, I guess I see a council, certainly not speaking for the council, but it appears as if everyone seems very pro home rule, right? And I see you guys seem like knowledgeable people who've been all around Pennsylvania, and you're saying home rule's the best thing ever. When I make a decision, I got pros and cons, right? So I'm sitting back there thinking, so what is the risk for Williamsport? It sounds great. Like, honestly, like I'm sold. Like, that makes sense. Cookie cutters don't always work, right? Is the risk really just if you screw up that charter, like Liz said the first time through, like you're SOL?
If I can kind of, it sounds like you're asking like, what's the drawback?
Yeah, like
Right?
if we could
Okay.
like just talk through what are some potential risks of this, because it doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't hear any other than the again, like the charter drafting process, not getting that right.
No, that's a great question. So the charter really is one of the big ones. That's why the consultant has become such a instrumental part of this, is to make sure that it gets done again legally by the book and it's done within the right way. So what I will say generally to your question is when you're looking at what are the possible cons of home rule, what this process really does is it lifts that model of what the state has set for municipalities of what they can work within, essentially lifting the parameters. So when you're looking at home rule, it does give you the option to go beyond those parameters. So again, when you're looking at developing your charter as well as your code, your city code book, the biggest drawback to it is the amount of work that will get put into it up front. I will say it's a lot up front to save you time in the back end when you're needing to do things for your city. So yeah, it is a big lift up front. And in terms of drawbacks, I've really just come to present the data, the facts objectively. I can't really speak to what may be good or bad about it, but yeah, again, for me, it's lifting those parameters and You know, again, people might say with the parameters lifted, you can do whatever you want, quote unquote, but you can't because you have the Government Study Commission, which is set up by voters, for voters to be voted on. And it's really represented by the people. So it's very democratic. And I think it's a good process, but that's a good question. I will reflect on that.
Thanks.
Andrew, do you mind chiming in here as well? Because that, I mean, Jonah's question kind of intrigues me. And I guess maybe if you don't mind me doing this, Jonah, sorry.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess maybe for some home rule municipalities that have kind of lived in this for a handful of years, maybe longer that you're aware of, have you gotten any kind of data back on, you know, maybe some pain points following the process, any kind of drawbacks that they've seen? Here's another question. Have we ever seen a municipality leave home rule and go to optional charter?
Yeah, that was going to be one of the first things that I was going to say is we have never seen anybody go back from home rule after adopting a charter. It was mentioned earlier about amending a charter. You know, from time to time, we do see charters be amended. Usually just minor tweaks around the edges. That happens through you know, a vote at either the primary or the general November election. So you know, what is developed and perhaps adopted is the new official charter. It's the constitution of the city. But it can still be amended through a voter referendum if need be. You know, honestly, the only thing I can say that I've truly heard people complain about is a county that went home rule, and I believe there was some regret of how many county commissioners they ended up putting on their board. It seemed, I think some folks felt it was a little unwieldy to have that many folks sitting on a board, elected board at a county level. But other than that, nothing, no like, you know, poison pill, you know, that would really seem like it'd be a detrimental risk to engaging this process.
Interesting.
Thanks, everybody.
Give me 1 second. Any other members of the public have any, Kevin, you're part of the yeah. Okay, that sounds great. Give us a minute here. Any other members of the public have any kind of questions? Mr. Huffman, come on up, name and address for the record, please.
Evening, Bruce Huffman, 1000 Cherry Street in the city. Just thanks for all your explanation there. Just maybe a couple of questions. You mentioned funding. The state might cover some of that. I wasn't sure if I got the numbers right. What percentage, if the city, you know, citizens would go through with this process, and you talked about the consultant being rather expensive, how much, if you talk about the total cost of the Government Study Commission for the 18 months, what percentage would the state pay?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if recommended through STAMP by your consultant, that's the strategic management program, planning grant that the city is currently in. Right now, the state is covering 90% of the cost of that. So if it is a recommendation, the city of Williamsport would just have to cover 10% of the cost of the consultant. For the Government Study Commission, they average between 25 and 50,000. So 10% of that cost.
And, you know, talking about the commissioners, the specific requirements or restrictions on serving as a commissioner on the Government Study Commission, can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, do they have to be a citizen? Do they have to be a taxpayer? Can they be an elected official?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they, I believe, have to reside within the municipality. They have to be a tax-paying voter, so above the age of 18. And then to your other question about elected officials. So looking based off of other examples of government study commissions, there is precedents where elected officials have served on there. Again, we've talked about Lancaster. The commissioners of their county did serve. I believe 2 of them served on the government study commission. So yes, elected officials can serve on the government study commission.
Okay, thanks. And I guess, like as Mr. Mackey said, when Williamsport went through this process 7, 8 years ago, we actually had, maybe you know the history, two competing sort of government study and charter study commission. And neither one of them had a consultant, an official consultant. I don't even remember at the time if it was even brought up that they could have one or should have one. But anyway, I mean, it sounds like with getting the charter right and all that kind of thing, it is heavily recommended but not required.
Yeah, so that's the first time I've heard of one being done without a consultant. I suppose it is possible. But in terms of ones that we have facilitated, they do have the consultant coming in. And again, at the very least, I know for sure that they will be drafting the charter and the city code, both of which are quite large documents. Again, as Andrew said before, you're essentially writing the constitution for your city here. And that kind of comes in before as well, where I said it's kind of a heavy lift up front. And there's a reason for that. That constitution could be here 50, 60, 100 years. So it's lasting, impactful work that you'll be doing.
And do the phrase home rule goes back quite a ways. Williamsport is operating under the optional third class city charter law, which was essentially the home rule for third class cities prior to the 1972 enactment, which gave it to all municipalities. In fact, back at our council chambers in Real City Hall, there's a document on the wall that has the phrase home rule, granted home rule powers. So, I mean, I understand the taxing implications are different, and I've done a side-by-side comparison of the optional charter versus the 1972 home rule statute. So I don't know if you can speak to anything about, other than the taxes. I mean, my understanding in talking with, I think his name is David Green at the state local commission office, we essentially have more powers than we realize as an optional third class city charter city.
Would you like to?
So just even to go back a little bit before 1972, and I might get the years a little wrong, but prior to becoming an optional plan, third class city, which is a strong mayor, which I believe is a strong mayor here.
Well, there's a couple of different options.
Yeah. So before that, every third class city was a commission form of government, which meant that every city council member was a head of a department. So, you're elected, you're head, you run the Department of Public Works. You're literally the department head. That was the case in every single city across the Commonwealth. Around 1972-ish, third class cities had the ability to adopt one of the sort of cookie cutter forms of government, which was sticking with commission, which was a strong mayor, or I believe a council manager form of government. But all that did was change that very high level, small piece, I mean, large in ramifications, but small structural piece of where the executive power lies, the administrative and executive power. So, you're still, by and large, bound to the third class city code. It's just that you've elected to have a strong mayor to operate within that third class city code. Home rule throws out the third class city code, and as we've been saying, allows you to adopt your own charter or constitution for the city of Williamsport.
Can I follow up on, I think, a point that Bruce is making? So when I look at the optional third class charter, right, at the end of it, before you get into the option A, option B, there's a list of laws that are applicable to us as an optional third class city, that are applicable to other third class cities that don't fall within the flexibility that Bruce is talking about with the optional third class charter. Do you know off the top of your head what, I guess, I mean, here's like a tangible example. Like, do you know what laws go away in that list by transitioning to home rule charter? I think that's kind of the point you're getting at, Bruce, is, yeah, there's things that optional third class cities have to still follow. I think that's maybe a more quantifiable way to maybe address the question that you're getting at, which I would be interested in as well. You may not know the answer to that. I don't know, but
I think the answer to that is, and this sounds more extreme than what I'm about to say, but they essentially all go away. Aside from the list that Jonas put up of the things that cannot change, the election code, the municipalities planning code, there are certain things that can, environmental laws that cannot be changed. But more or less, it's other than that, it's essentially a clean slate. Now, very few, if any, places take that approach. I would say like a scorched earth approach. People use the third class city code as the foundation and the bedrock and the starting point. But yeah, there's another point I was going to say, but yeah. And the other point I did want to mention was, you know, folks who do develop a third class city charter will often include a line or some part in the charter itself that says, you know, if anything, if we didn't address anything in the charter that we should have or that we may have missed, they say it in more legalese. But if there was something that was omitted, you know, that they should have included, we refer back to the third class city code. So that there's that default fail safe. You know, again, that bedrock of the third class city code that still is kind of more or less the foundation of this process.
Yeah, that was my understanding. I think I looked at, I think York is still an optional charter city. And I think when I looked, and they were one of the early it was 1957 is when that law was passed that allowed third class city charters to third class cities to pursue that. And I think when I was doing my research and I looked back at their charter that they wrote, it essentially then became the administrative code. You know, that they published that was the charter, and it just more or less got adopted as the administrative code. So yeah, maybe they didn't use the word home rule as much back then, but I think, you know, up until 1972, which then gave it to all municipalities, I think that was considered, other than Philadelphia, which had its own special thing, that was it. So, and it, you know, it's just like anything over time, it changes and evolves, and I know they even update the home rule statute from time to time. So, but I think that's all the questions I had. So thanks.
thanks, Bruce. Any other questions from members of the public? Okay. Miss Mealy had a question when Bruce was up there, and I thought somebody else did. Sorry. What they call that now? Oh, sorry, didn't realize that. The public's been like patiently like listening to all of us go back and forth, so.
The only
Please.
question I had was, I thought a minor point in the way that Bruce formed his original question, his first question was, if the citizens instead of the city decide to put the home rule question on the ballot, after Stamp makes a recommendation for home rule, is it incumbent upon the city to apply for grant funding for, that is to say, is the city required to provide a consultant, for one thing? And secondarily, if we're required to provide a consultant, are we also required, it seems like obviously we would then request the money from the state, but there aren't any barriers if it's citizen action that puts the question on the ballot to the DCED funding the Home Rule Study Commission.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Whether it's initiated by the public or council or the government here, you know, the consultants would, if recommended by Stamp, be able to be funded through DCED.
Okay, and the city would be required, that is to say, I don't know, in some sort of slightly parallel universe in which all of us decided that we were completely disinterested in home rule and the citizens moved forward and put it on the ballot because they felt in the public's best interest. the administration would be forced to provide the consultant for that commission,
I
correct?
believe so. Is that?
Yeah, the way the home rule law is written, city council is required to fund the government study
Okay.
commission. That doesn't say at what level,
Okay.
but it
Right.
just, but the budget for the government study commission work is to come from city council.
Understood. So there would potentially not be perhaps a way to force the government's hand to pay for a consultant? Or does the commission set the parameters for its own funding, set its own requirements?
No.
City council does.
City council,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't think we're living in that parallel universe right now, so I'm not super concerned about it, but I was just kind of.
Yeah, but
thinking
even
that.
even if we were, I mean, John brings up a good point. I mean, I don't know if there was a consultant for either commission
I'm
last time
questioning
around,
that.
and I don't know that either were well served by that. Right?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
no, right,
so-
I'm just, yeah.
If the people, if the people think it's important compared to us and they get it on the ballot, we should listen to them
Mhm.
and get them a consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a question.
Right. That, I just wanted to kind of follow up on that. And if you addressed it, I didn't hear, members, elected officials have served on, home rule study committees before. Have administrative officials?
I will say again, there is precedence where elected officials have served on them. In terms of administrative officials, I'm not.
Or members of the administration, that
Yeah,
is to say, like,
Not that I can think of, but possibly Andrew.
Yeah, there's nothing that would keep them from serving if elected.
okay, got it. So it wouldn't be if someone took a genuine interest in the process who happened to work for the city, there's nothing that would bar them from being involved. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mackey, you had a couple questions, I think.
Yeah, so most of my question revolves around the tax flexibility. Is there a certain percentage of our code that we'd have to change to get to those new tax flexibilities? Or could we, have 99% of our current code and then just adjust the tax rates as we need them?
Yeah, the latter is it the most accurate. So you can adjust whatever you have, you can add what you don't. Yeah, so essentially what you have can, as Andrew said, can be the bedrock and you can build up from there. It just removes the caps that are currently on them.
Thank you.
Any other questions by members? Any other questions from members of the public? So that takes us to the end of the agenda. I would thank both Andrew and Jonas for being here, for your presentation, for the dialogue. I don't want to speak for the rest of us or the public, but I got a lot out of it. It was helpful for me. And I don't know where I've got a strong interest in this myself. I think clearly city council does, given that we are doing this in a public forum, have facilitated all that kind of thing. I don't know, I think we want to see this happen. I don't know that we've got a clear answer on when sitting here today. I think that's a big thing to kind of stew on for sure. And I suspect we'll all get a little bit of qualitative feedback from people in our circles who maybe couldn't make it tonight, that are either listening in or will get the spark notes through some other conduit. But I think that's really kind of the big question is, where do we go from here? And I don't know that I have that answer, but it's something that I'll be thinking about big time. And I think we all will, but this helps that significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point because I can say from my own memory of the process, the last time we went through this, it felt rushed to me. And I think that was one of the big reasons neither one was successful. So, yeah, I think it's something that we really need to, just because we think it might be the right path forward, I don't think we want to rush into it. So I think that's a great point. So, yeah.
Agreed. So, I'll have to think about, members of the public that are here. I think at least one, at least one of us, know how to get a hold of at least one of us. So, I'm sure as you digest this, please don't be afraid to communicate additional questions, thoughts, concerns, pros, cons, whatever they are. I would look forward to hearing from them. I think other members would as well. So, and we're grateful for you being here, for your questions, et cetera. Very much so. All right, item 6 announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be Thursday, June 5th, 7 PM here in Trade and Transit 2, 3rd floor. Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, June 3rd, 11:30 AM, Public Safety, 1 PM, Finance Committee, 2:30 PM, Public Works. Wednesday, June 4th, 9 AM, Economic Revitalization. Thursday, June 5th, 7 PM, City Council. Motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all again for being here for a great dialogue.